All right, thank you, Vivek, and welcome everyone. There's an African proverb that goes, and I'll butcher this a bit, that the way to a man's heart, but not in a gendered way, is through the stomach. And, lunch is a very tough act to follow, but I'll try my best to touch your hearts. So, David Kambo is my name. I'm a director of land and infrastructure at the Special Economic Zones Authority, and I'm here to showcase the Naivasha Eco-Industrial project. This is a national and presidential priority project, and also a Vision 2030 project. So to start off, the park is envisioned as a model industrial eco-park in Africa under AFCFTA and the different regional economic communities that we are a member of, including EAC. And it's being developed by ourselves as the authority. And the purpose of this speech is to showcase the project and also show how it's demonstrated impact, how it's gained a lot of investor confidence with little to no funding at all, and which we now critically need to meet our investor infrastructure needs. And rather than go into a lot of belabor you with a lot of details, is to basically say that we want to signal to the world that Kenya and Africa are ready for investment through this. So I'll start off with two whys and one how. And we all know that Kenya's urbanization rate is higher than the global average. So, which leads to, and we all say this, a surge in informal jobs and settlements, and an increase in, social economic pressures, given that our economy is not growing at the same rate in matching our urban growth. So, which means we do not get to realize enough decent jobs, which also leads to high youth unemployment. You can see the numbers there. You're about 500 to 800,000, which, is a ticking time bomb for us. And secondly, our manufacturing sector, which is the fifth in terms of its contribution to our GDP, has been reflecting a declining performance over the years. Right now, we are currently at 7, not even 7.6. So, which means we also losing a critical mass of jobs, and our economic growth is stagnating despite, the macros showing that, we are kind of doing well in a way. So the SEZ program was developed to deal with this particular problem. And Naivasha SEZ is one such example as an anchor and a very critical project to showcase this and also reverse this trend. So it's part of the Green Economic Strategy, the National Climate Change Action Plan, National Industrialization Strategy, and anchored on the Kenya Vision 2030. Regionally, it's supposed to be a signal under the Africa Green Industrial Initiative, which is headed by His Excellency the President and hosted by the African Union. And now to get into the how. So the zone provides a competitive edge through the following ways. You have access to green energy, which in Kenya, 90% is supplied by renewable sources through our grid. Fast port clearance times, some of the benefits include the one-stop shop where you get all your business permits, trade facilitation permits done quickly. Provision of green infrastructure, which is a major anchor, including, sustainability metrics like, an effluent treatment plant, recycling, and water recycling system. You have sustainable stormwater management, and fortification of natural waterways, access to the port of Mombasa via rail, which reduces carbon emissions as part of what you're calling the cool chain corridor from Malaba, actually from Burundi all the way to Mombasa port. Similarly, the buildings will also be edge satisfied as part of the green manufacturing zone guidelines that we're developing with IFC. Provision of a mixed use hybrid urbanism approach to basically provide residential neighborhoods and amenities that you require to both live and support the labor pool that we'll be assembling through the jobs that we create. So, and the expected impact at a very high level is we're expecting to have at least 100,000 jobs, both direct in nature and indirect. And this will spur green manufacturing in Kenya through the zone, improve on our forex balance because we will be intending to do a lot of import substitution from the products we create there. It will also support tech and knowledge transfer, add on to grid stability, and also energy efficiency use, and also cement Kenya's position as a green manufacturing destination in Africa, given that we are the leaders of AGII. So the story begins that in 2019, the government saw it fit to start the project, given that it was part of a hub that was fed off of what we call the Naivasha ICD, or Internal Container Depot, along the SGR. And we saw the first tenant start operations at the park in 2024, with a lot of heavy lifting from my end, 3 months into my job as a director, land and infrastructure. And this was a welcome signal to the investors, since the project had slowed down because of budget cuts, which had reduced the trickle of funding to a very slow drip. And we are very proud of what we've achieved in the last 1.5 years. We have signed on an additional 17 enterprises who have taken up about 70% of the land, with the 7 projected on screen having started construction, and are expected to create about 4,500 jobs. We have also leased out another 2,000 acres to AfriXM and Arise as a consortium, who will be coming in to do their own integrated industrial park. We've also successfully brought on board a few partners, including IFC, UNIDO, GIZ, Trademark, among others, to build on technical capacity, provide legal and regulatory framework support, develop green industrial park guidelines, and as I mentioned earlier. And at the national level, we've constituted an interagency committee, which I chair, to facilitate the onboarding and facilitation of investors. This was very critical to onboarding the first investor, rather getting him operational. So at the regional level, the EAC SEZ regulations have been successfully passed through the authority's leadership and our participation as major players. But the story doesn't end here. All this shows that there's an unshakable confidence from the investors coming into the park in signaling to the rest of the world that we're ready for business. But now we're primarily here to plug in the infrastructure deficit. And I'll reiterate what I'd said in the panel earlier yesterday. All these fiscal incentives do not replace, the fundamentals of competitiveness. And that's where the rubber meets the road, and is what we are seeking to actually get through and get going. So we've also made good strides on some of our milestones. We've acquired the titles to the land and guaranteed land tenure through comprehensive strategic, environmental, and social audit, which we're also implementing. We're almost done with detailed engineering design for the whole development. And to fast-track operationalization, we decided to start off with a one-stop shop because, there are already investors who are coming on board. And so far, this is at 90%. We're also looking to now close on financing, which is very ambitious, in April of 2026, given that that's why we're here, because we are lagging behind critically, and the investors are running at full speed. To describe a bit of what the project components will entail, you have 2 substations, one of which is built with a capacity of 90 megawatts, green infrastructure suite that will include effluent treatment and water recycling plants, sustainable stormwater management, resilient mobility infrastructure. But now, given that we've had learnings from other SEZs and my experience in working on urban research for, on different city development strategies, having delivered award-winning mixed-use developments both here in Kenya, and also worked on different urban expansion plans in places like Israel, Singapore, and the US. This has helped quite a bit in creating our development strategy, which I like to phrase as an anchor plus model, whereby the government comes in when it comes to public SEZs and catalyzes a portion of it. So the government is the anchor, because no investor will put in their hard-earned money into a project that the government, especially a public project where the government shows no commitment. So this strategy means that, and you can see from the diagram there, that what you're catalyzing is just 1,000 of the 6,000 acres. So that is a phase 1. Now, given that that's where we're starting at, this requires about 110 million USD for the horizontal green infrastructure, with the government already having put in about 5 million to do the one-stop shop and the initial roads. In terms of the project performance, and this is where I think all of us are here, the project requires sustainable financing, used through an EPCF to unlock the infrastructure. at concessional rates. And our ideal ask would be to look at 2 to 3%, given that we did a few benchmark exercises to see what other countries are getting, with between a 30 to 50-year repayment period. And to get this all going and put in a legible manner that everybody will understand, we are also asking for about 2 million, which could be either in grant form or at no interest, to package the whole project. And this accounts for about 85% of the financing needs in terms of debt. So how to qualify this, I'd say the project uptick in terms of the numbers I've just mentioned, the 70% uptick in land, is a clear indication of its ability to unlock stable and sufficient cash flows to service debt or concessional debt. And this is not to even add the more than significant revenues that will unlock, tax revenues from other spillovers from the project, which can also be used to pay the debt. So this provides a better landing for the government in form of, first of all, reduced dependence from the exchequer. Secondly, we're able to maintain our competitive edge by maintaining our subsidized land rates. So that means we don't have to keep ratcheting up our rents to meet interest payments or debt service, which is the winning strategies that we've employed so far in getting all these investors on board. You can also see that the project risks vary from low to medium, with the major ones on change of law and interagency operational challenge have been addressed adequately through locking SEZ benefits for the investor for the first 10 years, and then fast-tracking one-stop shop operationalization. And the rest of the others are taken care of through the SEA and such like, and through resilient and climate-proof infrastructure design. So to demonstrate what I mean from the cash flows, you can see that the collections are about year 10 or so, which are our projections. We will be able to operate at a surplus if we're able to unlock concessional debt financing. And these cash flows here do not include any others, or rather the significant tax and other revenue sources that we'll be able to unlock for the government. So which shows you that in terms of it being sustainable, there's a reason to look at it as a sure win. Now, it is clear that we need to unlock infrastructure development. We're actually in very dire need to do this in a timely manner, especially, given that the investors are expecting us to provide this by the time they're done with their facilities development. The challenge here then to all of you and the key ask is, how then do we plug in the $108 million gap for green infrastructure development through an EPCF arrangement on concessional terms, and whose success ultimately will not just be ours or the country's, but that of continental pride, given that this is anchored at the continental level and is a project of continental interest. The journey so far has been very challenging, bittersweet to some extent, as you can see from what I've just presented. But what I'm basically showing you and proving to you that this is an opportunity like no other to transform our narrative in terms of socioeconomic self-determination, in driving economic growth by Africans and for Africans. And to cap it off, I am very confident that the team at SEZ, which combines both domestic and international experience, and this is what we offer to our investors and to the country, coupled with the country's administration support in basically in promoting the SEZs globally, and also our ability to steer policy and the support you're getting from our government in doing, enable better legal policy and better legal frameworks. I believe the project is a sure bet and is in good hands. And as an authority and as David, I invite you to join us, not only as development finance partners, but on many more initiatives that we're carrying out through the authority in unlocking Africa's economic future. Thank you for your time. Asanteni sana. And to getting finances untangled, infrastructure built, and dreams enabled.
Did you have a chance to speak to one of the mentors beforehand?
Yes, yeah,
Nasra, you did?
Yes.
Would you like to start the discussion with your thoughts on what works well, what could be done better, the opportunities. And please go back to the slide on the ask. Project preparation, 2 million grant, green development finance, 108 million concessional finance.
So firstly, congratulations on delivering your pitch. I think for me, what you did well, one, your project framing, I think was good. The sequence between the national policy to the value proposition and the capital that you need, that was put well. Second, I think in terms of your strategic alignment with national priorities such as Vision 2030 and the regional conversation around the Africa Green Industrialization Initiative is also good in the sense that it grounds it in legitimacy on priorities. And then I also like that it was data-driven or backed. In terms of what needs stronger emphasis, I think what needs to come out really clearly is this is what we've done. However, the key ask is infrastructure deficit as the core constraint. Because ultimately, the reason you need the concessional financing is that there's that gap in the infrastructure. So I think what needs to come out clearly is you've done the heavy lifting in creating this SEZ, but even the best located SEZ can't attract or retain investment if we don't have the infrastructure to really give the confidence for tenants to come in. And then I think the second thing in terms of the capital ask, I know you mentioned concessional financing as a key way or a path that you're leaning towards. Perhaps consider having or being open to alternative forms of financing as well, especially when it comes to infrastructure or climate grants to support certain items within the SEZ. And I think you mentioned the green SEZ advantage, and yes, you've made mention about the EDGE certification, which is great. The other component maybe that needs to come out clearly is what exactly would make Naivasha green? Is it are you also working on renewables as part of that deal? Maybe a little more clearly. And then I think linking the project with the broader transformation of Naivasha, potentially. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I think the facts that you have put are well documented. What wasn't clear for me is how far you are in terms of development. You said 70% was leased, and how much has been operational and how much has been already on site. That wasn't very clear to me. And then the 30%, you said only 1,000 square meters was going to be the initial phase.
1,000 acres.
Acres, correct me if I'm wrong, yeah. So that's good. So for me, I think to detail the missing infrastructure would be good. So is that going to be roads, drainage? What kind of infrastructure are you trying to raise money for? I think it's going to be very critical. Are you only looking for a road network? Are you looking for fiber? Are you looking for, what are you exactly looking for? For me, that was missing from the presentation. So if you could clarify that, that would be great.
Okay, so to start with your questions, I think I mentioned about I actually went into a bit of detail into the infrastructure suite that we'll be offering, which includes, it should be on the project snapshot. So, which includes, the power infrastructure. There's 2 substations, the green infrastructure suite that includes sustainable mobility. So that's roads, streets, footpaths, cycling ways, the likes. We're also looking at sustainable stormwater management and the effluent treatment plant and wastewater recycling systems, which I know it goes into a bit of detail there, but it's all embedded as this package that we're going to offer now to investors. Sorry, I didn't get the second part of your question.
The second part was of the 70% leased of the project, how operational has it been, and what do you have actually on ground at the moment?
So in terms of development, we are looking at about 12% on the infrastructure development. So the 70% represents what has been leased out, ahead of terms signed, leases signed, and is already being developed by the individual tenants. Now, out of that, they require this infrastructure suite to be, delivered to their doorstep. So we've only managed to do 12%, and I think that represents the $5 million that the government has already put in to do initial roads and the one-stop shop, which I think should answer the question.
Also, another question that came to my mind, do you consider any levies charged from your tenants that could help towards this number that you're asking for?
Yes, so as part of the modeling, we have, I think, 10% management fee on annual rents that will then get into, an urban management fund, which will be used to now maintain the facilities in terms of making sure the roads are repaired on time, the footpaths, the street lights are, working, up and working. And also, there's an additional OSS facility fee, which will be on a subscription-based model. We're trying to get a digital provider to come and partner up with us to then, digitize a lot of our services. And we're working closely, I think, with the Singaporean government for this.
With the current development financing environment, getting 100% concessional funding might be an issue. You need to start thinking about blended finance and the multiplier effect of the concessional funding that you get. So, and using the proportions that you have on the equity and the debt, for example, it will be a good way to start thinking how you bring in more concessional funding into equity. And from a debt perspective, crowding in, based on that first loss guarantee perhaps that comes with concessional funding, crowding in more private sector. And that's because our domestic private sector and institutional investors actually have the financing. Even our government is significantly funded by the private sector itself. So we need to start thinking how we can actually crowd in the private sector to fund some of these infrastructure projects. One thing that stands out for me in terms of the project is how you're thinking about climate resilience overall. You've talked about water treatment, that's very important. I've not heard about waste to energy, and maybe it's there, but how do you actually manage your waste is an issue that most of the cities are struggling with. So just thinking about the challenges that we are seeing in the current cities and how you can actually solve that as you bringing up a new development. So that will be important, I believe. But one more thing. Naivasha is, from a geothermal perspective, is one of, we have the best resource, or perhaps part of the best resource within the Rift Valley. It will be good to hear more about how you're thinking about energy from that perspective, because for you as a private developer, that will be, I would say, a quick win. If you were to have, for example, a wheeling agreement with some of the independent power producers, in the long run, that might actually be cheaper than going through the normal main grid. So have you considered that? Are there conversations? Because that would also affect your financial modeling in the long run in terms of the operational costs of the SEZ.
Okay. Yeah. So to your last point, the initial strategy was to get power directly from KenGen, and I think this was at 5 Kenya shillings per kilowatt hour. And the whole idea was to take advantage of the steam that is vented, or rather, wasted, and tap that, use that to generate power, and then wheel it to our site. Now, and this was, in 2019, didn't get to materialize, unfortunately. So, that was set aside. So what has happened is we've ended up, making sure that we lobby hard enough to get a gazette notice, or rather gazetted tariff for our SEZs, which is about double, about 6-7 USD cents per kilowatt hour. And that has helped quite a bit, especially in, creating the policy stability, because, when you're marketing a zone at one tariff and then it's not available, no investor is going to trust you. So right now we are at a place where we can say, ultimately, yes, we have a tariff that is gazetted. We're trying to operationalize it and make sure that it's accessible to all SEZs, not just ourselves. so that at least there's the level playing field. Nobody can say, I'm unjust, though rather you're being unjust because you're just offering yourselves incentives, but not the rest of us. So that is one, to just answer your question on using the geothermal corridor and its advantages being close to us. Secondly, and the reason why I didn't put that here is, yes, we are pursuing different financing approaches, one being the blended format through, I think, CPF, who you're speaking to. There's an Italian Climate Fund too, who also wants to come on board. So, but what I presented was more or less an ideal situation that speaks to how is the easiest, one of the easier ways to just unlock this, given that we're also getting into an election cycle. So, procurement issues and all this. And that's why I also put a very ambitious target for April 2026 to close all this. So, and it's good that, the project has this green initiative, rather is anchored on the green industrial initiative, given that we are embarking on an exercise to make sure that we embed green industrial guidelines as a national policy. And that will mean that off of that, we might even create special funds or even tap into the GCF, the Global Climate Fund, to look at how best can we access, cheaper funding for projects that qualify as green industrial parks in Kenya.
It's a fantastic project, and congratulations to the Kenyan government to, conceptualize this. We are in a very different interest rate environment right now. So obviously, 3 years ago it was different, and right now we're talking about 30-year bonds, American Treasury bonds yielding 5%, right? And if you add development market, underdeveloped or developing market risk, as well as infrastructure to that. So if you go to the market for financing, if we leave aside, say concessional finance, you're talking about 8-9% at least in dollar terms. Would this project be viable at that rate of interest for infrastructure financing that you're looking at? That's the first question. The second question is, you're obviously phase one is, I think 1/6 of the entire scale of the project, and you've managed to get, 10 and 70%, which is commendable. But has there been a study done, a deep dive done to see what's the market potential for creating all these manufacturing jobs? Which industries? Who will be these critical anchor tenants for these industries? What do they want? Are they ready to come to this location? If 50,000 jobs are to be created, is there enough social infrastructure for 50,000 people to live around there, migrate to this location, so on and so forth? So those are obviously important questions, because you can create all the infrastructure and have the land, but then are the industries coming there? Are people with those job skills there coming there, and so on and so forth? So two aspects is, one is the viability of the project. So if we say we don't get 2% financing and it's 9%, is it viable? And the second is that the tenants. The third is, maybe after you have a response to this, I could give some suggestions on how you could look at alternate ways to finance this. But I'll let you answer the first 2 points.
Okay, thank you, Chirag. Let me start off with how the project came to be. So Naivasha's special economic zone was envisioned as a textile park. At the beginning. This didn't come to fruition because, you're missing key infrastructure. The likes of, some of the bigger garment factories would come here and be like, okay, I don't have access to an effluent treatment plant, therefore I will not come, because my market demands that I show them how I treat my waste, and whether that's sustainable, or else I won't be able to access that market. So from the get-go, you can tell that the infrastructure aspect is key, whether it comes before or after. Now, with that, there was a whole feasibility done looking at, both traditional and sunrise sectors, which were baked into the master planning. Fortunately, to some extent, we were able to get some of the, traditional sectors, construction and allied, some of the tenants that have come on. But our major goal to get, that one textile anchor was never realized. However, at this current moment, we have about 4 who are looking to come on board. But they need one thing. to get the infrastructure going. They've already started seeing that critical mass, the signing of a Flexing Bank and Arise, sends a very big signal. These are big players in the market. So which means that we are headed somewhere. The project has shown it's viable and all that. So how did we then, make sure that we're able to attract investors and at least get some of the land absorbed or, taken up by investors, is we decided to discount it significantly because the project was struggling. And these were about by 85%, based on current market rates, which means that your collections will also take a hit on one side. But now, and I don't think we've shown this, and it's something, I kept telling Vivek to, give me some pointers on, is how best do you demonstrate that economic rate of return, given that you're already starting at a sort of a disadvantage, and show that the cash flows are able to do it to this extent comfortably. You can push it maybe up to 7 and still be able to, get somewhere. But at the end of the day, this is ideal. This is where we can get to. Even probably at 9%, we'd still be able to sort of make sure that the debt is taken care of. We can ratchet up the trend slightly. However, given that the project has had its success based on that subsidy, that initial subsidy, you do not want to undo all that progress. So, you're sort of in a catch-22 situation. And that is why, speaking to other sources of funding would be very important. We're already doing that. Hasn't been shown here, but those are, conversations that are at their infancy. But they're very interested, given that the project has shown, yes, you can generate cash flows. So that is one. And I think those are your two questions. The third question?
If I may suggest, in Dubai, for example, we've had significant projects where infrastructure was built from scratch, right? So the pumping of, whether it's a pure real estate project or a cluster project or so on and so forth. And the strategy has been that if the project is viable, what you do is take a portion of that land, sell it upfront, instead of trying to lease everything in the long term. Sell it upfront, use those cash flows to actually pump in the infrastructure so that you don't have to actually borrow at expensive rates from the market and answer all these questions. And if you're confident of the viability, just take, like if you've got 1,000 acres that you're developing in phase 1, take another 1,000 acres off, give it to a private developer or industries that are interested in long-term investments in their market, and use that money to build the infrastructure. So you can then have a dual hybrid model, one of leasing, another of sales, without actually having to spend 8, 9, 10% interest annually. So that model has worked very well. For example, we started the IFC, the financial center, with only a piece of land given to us. And we took and sold 25% of that upfront to third-party developers. Used that money to build on not only on the infrastructure, but also new buildings, which were then leased successfully and created hundreds of millions of dollars of cash flow without actually spending a dollar from the pocket. So just a food for thought for you guys.
Is it a lease agreement or are they paying anything upfront?
So it's a lease agreement with maybe like a 3-year lag between you start paying your lease rents. But now and this is why it becomes a bit interesting. Having worked on a few other private real estate projects, large scale mixed use projects, that would be a fantastic solution. Now the thing is, you have to work within the constraints of the current environment. You cannot sell public land in Kenya. You can only lease it. Which means, how you structure your leases and your collections.
100-year lease, 99-year lease?
Yes, long-term leases. Okay. But now, if you're given, an egg and told to make an omelette, but you don't have the ingredients, then you kind of have to figure out a way to get it going. And that's what we did with phase 1. It would have been ideal to do what you've mentioned. If I was there in 2019, yes. First thing, get an anchor tenant, get an anchor developer, good concessions, make sure that they get the project up and going as quick as possible. Then the expansion strategy, probably government will take a portion of it and then the rest will be floated into the market. That did not happen. We've been 1.5 years into this project. We've gone from 1 tenant to 17 So which can show you that, we are really determined and we're here to do business.
Sorry, 1 tenant to 17 in how much time?
1.5 years.
1.5 years.
Exactly.
So this is selling.
Yes, it is selling.
It's a question of pricing it at a level and sort of getting the finance in.
Exactly. But you see, given that the project was struggling and the decision to really depress the rents kind of sets us in a position where we have to be also careful not to signal that we're going to undo all this.
And folks, I mean, Zilla, you talked about this a little bit in terms of looking at blended finance structures. There is a green element here as well. And we are really, majority of the money is going into infrastructure. On a PPP basis, is there the possibility to find I don't know whether they could be, for example, I'll give you an example in South Africa. One of our most successful projects in the Catapult process is a $1.33 billion water project serving platinum mines and community of 400,000 people. That is commercially financed. The tariff is benchmarked to commercially available tariff. That's all green. The first phase is entirely guaranteed by National Treasury in South Africa. But it's designed to be so attractive that there's no chance that the Treasury guarantee will be called at all. And this is all domestic capital. Now, there are some domestic, and Zilla, you'll be at the forefront of this, domestic capital mobilization efforts in Kenya, green strategies. Can we get to, is there a path to 7% US dollar rate funding?
So, of course, for each project, it's negotiated differently depending on your model as well. But the ideal situation will be for you to actually use the concessional funding as more of a guarantee. So ideally, the junior equity will be concessional funding, and that reduces the risk of your project. Therefore, even the commercial capital that you get will not be at market rate, because the concessional funders are taking up the highest risk, right? So in a situation when the current environment you're in, of course, you'll get concessional funding, but the questions you'll always ask, people will always ask, or the concessional, the development finance institutions will ask, is the multiplier effect of that concessional funding, because priorities are changing because of the geopolitical issues, and so it's ideally having a capital stack that makes it attractive for the commercial lenders, and at the same time reduces the risk, ideally because the concessional funding is enhancing your project from a credit enhancement perspective. And that way you're able to get more private capital at a better rate other than the commercial rate. So it's possible if the project is credit enhanced, and that's why you need concessional funding. Okay. To enhance the project.
Given that you've said that, so the concessional funding would be more of a viability gap fund of some sort?
Yes.
Then how do we get there? By making sure that we are able to also interest enough commercial, partners who would want to come on board. Because at the end of the day, this is government, and you know what that looks like out there. So, but in terms of the project being viable and whoever's signed and the cash flows, that at least is baked in, and we can tell you with a lot of confidence that that shouldn't be a problem. However, and I'm sure you've seen this, commercial rates are not necessarily very suitable for public interest projects. The only thing I think, one of the most important things which we need a lot of assistance in is how do you then show the economic rate of return, that multiplier effect, which is great. It's actually way more significant than even what I've mentioned here, because you can imagine for each job, for each, even if you use, say for example, for every one job, you create another 2 jobs outside. For the urban explosion that will actually come about from this, some of the amenities that will also be attracted to the area. So there's going to be so much more in terms of looking at it as a city catalyst. But now baking that in as part of this process, in terms of unlocking projects financially, is one of the gaps that we have as an authority, and also in terms of how we structure our projects generally in the public sector. So, and I believe, that's why the panel is also here to give a bit of guidance on that.
I would just like to take a minute because, Chirag has some interesting views on the process. Because one of the things that has come through in this entire pitch sessions is the route to profit, route to revenue, the strategy one should adopt to get, and he hinted at that you think of pre-sales. Mm-hmm. So I'd just like for him to share the DIFC, Dubai Finance, International Finance Center experience for the benefit of everybody in the room, not just yourself. So go ahead, Chirag.
Like I mentioned, as in if you as you rightly said, maybe the train left the station before you joined. But if you think of the commercial viability of the project without taking on debt, that's really when it is successful. And you may have to give a piece of the cake up front, but even that cake. Giving that cake up front means that you're going to have more tenants, more sustainability of the project and viability of the project that actually helps you build that. You could also look at, and I don't know the Kenyan legal and regulatory environment on that, private sector infrastructure providers. So if it's a private SEZ, like it's not private, it's publicly owned or run, but still all the players that are coming in are private and they obviously do business and they're getting, as you said, like 85% discount to market rate. Well, they should be able to pay market-driven infrastructure costs. So you could even invite market infrastructure players to come and put in the infrastructure and charge these players those market rates. The point is if the government tries to do everything, and then it's actually seeking finance for all of these things based on these long-term viability questions, you just slow down the project. So you probably need to find what are the 4 or 5 things you can do by going to market, breaking this project into smaller pieces, whether you can sell pieces of land or infrastructures that private sector can provide. And that's the way we operate. So when in Dubai we have this project, we can now go back to the government. And give an example of Emirates Airlines, which is one of the world's leading airlines in the world. So the government gave an initial $10 million to Emirates Airlines, and it's never gone back to the government for any financing. It's basically managed to do that just out of its own business commercial viability. So if the project is commercially viable, whether it's run by the government or private sector, it should be commercially viable.
Join me in thanking David and our panelists. Excellent speech. Thank you very much. Onwards and upwards.